G'day everyone, Coop here, just doing a quick video firstly to say sorry for a few weeks of no activity. I've been very busy working on a couple of things, and I've also been up to some stuff which I'll get a video out shortly explaining what's going on and where I want to take the channel from here. But why I've been busy, one of the reasons is I've been working on a new asset, and I've got this asset sitting with the asset store for approval, and hopefully if I can get it all submitted properly and get it all approved, it should be on the asset store shortly, in which case I'll get some links out and that sort of thing, and I'll update this video, etc. But anyway, this asset is a dungeon generator system that I've called EasyDG, the idea being that it's an easy to implement and easy to use dungeon generator, and you can use it to generate prefabs, and you can also use it to generate levels or dungeons within the game on the fly. So if you load a new level, you'll get a new dungeon, that kind of thing. And you can feed it some variables just to control what you end up with, and you'll also see that when you're working with the prefabs, you can actually really get down and edit them on a very individual level, removing parts and adding parts and that kind of thing. But I just want to cover how to use that now. Hopefully we'll keep this a quick video, see how we go. I've already got some stuff in the scene already. I've got the camera and a light, which I've just moved out of the road, you can see here in the scene view, but otherwise nothing else. I haven't even got the asset in here yet, but anyway, I've got some stuff that I've just put under a folder called stuff. I've got some prefabs, and it's just some stuff in here, so the basic prefabs that you'll need for the dungeon generator to work, and fear not if you don't really have anything, if you just want to play with it. There are some sample assets provided with the system, but you'll see that. The purpose of this is just to show you that you can get it to work with a variety of assets, so if you have your own prefabs you can use those. I just have some simple stuff like some walls, very simple, just meshes with box colliders, nothing fancy. Same goes for the door, just few different box colliders but a simple mesh. So the idea is I've got a door piece, a floor tile which is just 5 by 5, just a cube, and we got some walls, different varieties, you can see down here. I said we got a door, yep, and a corner piece, which is just like a pillar, I guess, or a column of some sort to sit in the corners. You'll see what that's used for, but it's very easy. That's just a cube. It's just sort of one by one, but a little bit larger, and 5 units tall. That's just the size scale I've gone with for this demonstration. It doesn't really matter. The models do need to be in scale with each other, so the walls and the tile, for example, if we get a wall out here, you'll sort of see they're about the same size, so you will need them to be in scale with each other, but otherwise the scale of them overall doesn't really matter. It'll sort of all base itself off this floor tile, so if this was 10 by 10 it'll space everything out accordingly, but you would need to ensure that the walls are like 10 units long to compensate. And I've just got the models. That's all the models and the materials just for the prefabs, and just a copy of the scene. Cool, I'll close all that, we don't need to see it. Down here, if I bring this up, I've actually got the asset here. Once again, you should ideally be able to get this through the asset store, but for the purpose of this video I'm just going to use this package I've got here. So I'm just going to run that and import it in. You want the core folder at the very least. The core folder is what it says. It's basically everything that you'll need to get it to work, but that won't include the sample prefabs. So if you have your own prefabs, you just want the core, but if you do want to use some of the prefabs and you want to have a look at some of the stuff, you've got the sample scene here as well, which has the prefabs and stuff in it. I won't actually get the sample scene itself. I don't really need that at this point. All that is just a scene with the dungeon generator prefab already in there with some settings, so you can basically just click go and watch it work. Cool, so that's all we need. I'm going to get the sample prefabs. The documentation's in there as well, so if you have just got this, definitely have a read through that. There's some good info in there about all the different functions, and if you want to call this, if you want to call the level generator via a script, you'll want the information in there to do it, and it's quite easy. It's really easy to do. Cool, that's all I'm going to get. So I'm just getting the sample prefabs, and I'm getting the core system, which is all the scripts and a couple other prefabs that you'll want. So we'll just import that in, it'll bring it in, there we go, EasyDG. And we can see in here we've got the sample scene with the prefabs. There's some materials, etc. You can use this down here. That's dungeon generator prefab. It's already got some variables filled out. I'm not going to. I'm going to set it up from scratch. But we can see in here we've also got some components. So we've got a door, floor, wall, corner. Same as what we had in the other folder. Alright, cool. I'm going to create an empty game object. I'm just going to call it dungeon generator. I think you can call this whatever you like. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to put it at 0, 0, 0. That also doesn't matter. I think you can put that anywhere, whatever. In the core folder under scripts, I'm going to get the dungeon generator script. I'm going to drag that up and just drop it on that object we just created. I'm also going to go to one of our prefabs. I'm going to go to the floor tile prefab, and I'm going to add the tile script to it. It's the two things you need to do. So your floor tile prefab needs to have the tile script, and you need to have a dungeon generator object in the scene with that script attached. The two editor, I've called them scripts. I don't think they strictly are, but whatever. Those two will just control some of the buttons when you click on these things, which you'll see in a second. So we'll go to the dungeon generator, and you can see we've got a bunch of control variables here, none of which are filled out. So I'm just going to chuck some random stuff in here. We'll start with a name for the dungeon. I'll just call it dungeon number, and it will append a number to that. The tile prefab, I'm just going to take our floor tile here, drop that in. Wall prefab, so I have 4. 1. And 4, cool. Door 1. Should just be able to do this. Which one do I want though? Door 01, I think it is. Yeah, that was helpful. And corner. Alright, total lines. So these are the variables that really matter. So that's just our prefabs. So you can see I've just dragged and dropped my prefabs from here in. Nothing too fancy going on there, so you just assign whichever prefabs you have. The most important one is the floor tile, so its size is going to dictate everything. Total lines, so this, if you've sort of had a read of the documentation, the way the generator works, it'll run lines out from the center point sort of randomly and move directions, etc. And it will do that. Each line will consist of however many tiles you set here. So if we do, say, 2 lines with 10 tiles, it'll go, 10 tiles out, stop, and then it'll either reset back to this point or it'll keep going depending on what you dictate. So we'll just say we'll do 3 lines. Each one can have 50 tiles. Change direction chance, I'll just set to something simple like 10, so something really small. Door spawn I'll set to, just set that to 100 for now. Room spawn I'll set to 30. So the change direction chance is as it sounds. So at each tile it'll check. If that check passes, it'll sort of change its direction. It'll move in a different direction and start moving around. Door spawn basically says, do you want your doors to spawn? 100% means yep, it's going to spawn one every time it should. The room spawn, the way the rooms work is a little bit weird as well, but each tile that it goes along, it's then going to do a tile outwards. So if it's a room, it'll expand that hallway by however many tiles you tell it to. And so each tile it'll do a check, and that check has a 30% chance of being a room. So I'm going to tick this, delete dungeon on new. I'll actually expand that out a bit so we can read it. What this will do is, if there's a dungeon already in the scene, when we click the generate dungeon button, it's just going to delete it and replace it with a new one. Allow parallel lines to touch. And once again, all this is in the documentation, so I recommend have a read. But this will just say whether or not it's going to allow the hallways to touch each other. I'm going to leave that off. We don't really want that. Generate continuous basically says when it reaches the end of a line, is it going to return back to 0, or is it actually going to keep going? So you can have dungeons that stretch out and will go off into the distance kind of thing, or you can have ones that will seem to be very grouped together and they'll stay to the center, and that setting will control that. So I'm going to leave that off for now. Generate rooms, we do want it to. We want it to generate walls, corners, and this option here, only spawn doors at hall ends. We'll put doors only at the end of hallways. It's a good setting. It's kind of, you do want it. Depending on sort of how you want your game to work and what you've got set up, generally you'll have this on. But what this will do is, instead of, if you've got a long hallway, you don't want a door, like each sort of step down the hallway. You want it to only be at the ends, and that will control that. So if you turn this off, you'll have, with 100% chance, you'll have hallways that are just filled with doors, which you probably don't really want. So yeah, going to leave that on. And these variables here will control the size of your room. So your length is, how many tiles along the line long is the room. Wide is how wide is that room. So play with those and you'll see the different results. So I'm just going to set that to something simple for now. There we go, that'll do. And these two variables will control how often it places rooms. So you've got the chance variable up here, which I may even drop. I'll just drop that down to 15 just to make it more visible what's going on. But this will also say, you don't want rooms to spawn straight away, and you also don't want them to spawn right at the end of a line. It'll look a bit weird. I don't know, maybe you do, play with it. But this will just stop that from happening. So I'll just, it'll have to be at least 2 tiles from the start or end of a line, and it'll have to be at least 2 tiles from the last room before it can actually do a room. And the manual mode template, we do need to set that. So I've got one in here already, edit template. That actually comes with the dungeon generator system. It's in there under prefabs. It's nothing fancy, it's just a, 10 by 10, so it's actually quite big. Our tiles are only 5, so I'll scale that down. And I'll just make it a bit smaller too. But it's just a template tile, and it's, as you can see, it's transparent. But it'll use that when you enter the manual edit mode, which you'll see that in a second. I'm just going to delete that. Q, back on the dungeon generator, set the edit template. Don't need to set these for now. So when you're using the manual edit mode, which I'll cover soon, you can use these to set its starting point, but we don't need to worry about that right now. There we go, so that's all your values set. Once again, check the documentation that comes with it. It does cover a lot of this stuff in a lot more detail than I just did. But yep, once you have everything set, you should just be able to click Generate Dungeon, and we'll have a dungeon. And there you have it. You can sort of see what's going on there. You can see the rooms and the individual little hallways. You can also see it's done 3 lines. If we zoom in, you can see the doorways there as well. So like I said, they're at the end of each hallway. You don't have them spawning sort of the whole way through. If I turn that off and do a finalize, you should see what I mean. So there you go. If we control the door spawn chance, like drop it to something really small, 11%. You can see there's a lot less chance of a door actually appearing, but they are still appearing in the center of hallways, so we can stop that from happening. There we go. So that is at its most simplest how the system works. So once again, you can control a lot of different factors just by changing these control variables. End up with some very different results. If we increase the direction chance, say 25, start getting some very different looking dungeons. Generate continuous, it's going to be quite long. There you go. So that's the basic functionality. You can generate a dungeon prefab. Just going to drop these back down again. Just generate something small. You can see here it's also giving it a number. So that's dungeon number 5, meaning we've generated 5 dungeons. You can reset that counter there. You can also delete the dungeon. So yeah, delete reset the counter, generate. There we go, and the new one's on number 1 again, and it's using that name that we decided. So there it is, dungeon number. You can change that to whatever you want, you know, call it coop, something like that, whatever you want. And that's the name it'll give the dungeon object when it creates it. So that right there, if we expand that out, you can sort of see everything sitting within it. You can sort of then just do whatever you want with it. It's kept all the tiles just in case you want to do further checks on it. You can actually do some checks on each individual object. You could combine it into one mesh if you wanted to, but I think that would make the layout a bit interesting. But generally at this size it's not too much of a strain. It seems to work pretty well, I find. So you could take this and use it as a prefab if you wanted to. Just going to shrink these 2 folders. Just going to save a prefab of that. Dungeon number 1. If we go back to the generator, I'm just going to delete it, reset the dungeon count. Alright, cool. So got dungeon number 1. Let's say we want to do something further with it for some reason. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename it. I'm going to call it import. And I'm going to drag a copy of it into the scene. There we go. And I'm going to move that to 0, 0, 0. Go to the dungeon generator and import dungeon. So when you do that, it's going to find the object called import, and it's going to recreate this dungeon and bring it back in so that we can keep editing it. There we go. Import. There you can see it. Dungeon number 1 has been imported. So that's now set as the current dungeon, so we can, if we want to, we can clear the prefabs that are on it. Or we could, sorry, it's already done it when it's recreated the dungeon. Sorry, I forgot to mention. It's just left it as the flat layout of the dungeon. So what you can do is you can finalize the layout, which will bring all the prefabs back on, and it'll use the settings you've dictated up here. So it'll use all these booleans, it'll use these chance variables, etc. to lay all the prefabs out. If we click that a few times, you can see everything moving around. It's just sort of rotating or sort of randomly placing everything again. You can also clear it, so you can delete everything that's on the dungeon, which is cool. Bring it back up. Or one of the other things you can do, excuse me, and I've spoken about it a couple of times, is the manual edit mode. And what this will do is will allow you to just get a bit more customization over your levels. So if you want to personalize an aspect of it, you can toggle the manual edit mode, which will bring this little template into your scene. If we click on the scene view using the arrow keys, we can start to move it around. And using spacebar, and all these keys are customizable. You just need to edit a couple of scripts. It's all explained in the documentation. But you can just start to build your own dungeons, which is cool, nice and easy. You can expand it, make it a bit bigger if you wanted to. You can go both directions. And when you're done, simply turn that back off and finalize, and it'll be included in your dungeon. If we turn that back on, you can also delete parts of it. And once again, they'll be included too. So with a combination of using the manual edit mode and the import dungeon, you can actually create custom pieces. So if you just wanted this sort of part of the hallway, you could just delete everything else, save that as a dungeon prefab, and then when you create a new dungeon, you can simply drag the prefab back in, position it, I'll sort of attach it to your dungeon how you want it to be, rename the whole thing to import, and you can just bring it all back in as one dungeon. So you can, there's a lot of customization you can have here, and it's very, very easy to achieve. The last thing I'll probably talk about, I think that's covered most of it. Most of it's pretty straightforward. Generating a blank dungeon's handy. You can do that just to simply create a new dungeon object, but it won't have anything in it. You can use that just to enter edit mode and create dungeons how you want to. Yeah, nothing fancy. Bump that door chance back up. There we go. Yay, doors. But yeah, that dungeon will just function perfectly normally. So delete it, reset dungeon count, so it goes back to 1. That's all pretty straightforward. The last thing we can probably do is just generate a dungeon quickly. Let's say we want to start manual edit mode at this tile here. If we check its position, what do we got? 45 by 50. So like I was saying before, you can adjust where manual edit mode starts by adjusting these. So you could say 45 by 50, I think that'll do it, and that'll start manual edit mode at that point. It just makes it a bit easier. Otherwise it'd start at 0 by, at 0, 0, and you'd have to move it over there, which would be annoying. So that will just allow you to start wherever you want. If we turn that back off, you can also, if you click a tile, you have the option to copy the position to edit mode, which if you click it and then go back to dungeon generator, it'll have those new variables in there, so when you turn on edit mode it will start at that point. And that's it. That's the whole generator right there. Like I said, you can call it from a script. I might do another video covering that, but it is really easy. You just feed it some variables, and yeah, you can come up with whatever kind of generator, whatever kind of dungeons you would like. And as I mentioned as well, I'll just quickly change a couple of things. I'll go back into the Easy DG. If we go to the sample prefabs, just go to the components, you can see there we also have some components of our own. So I might just change these so you can sort of see the difference in the dungeons. I think they're both called floor tile, which isn't helpful. Just put that in there. Just set that to 1. Wall. Leave everything else the same. Generate. There we go. So it looks a bit different, and this sort of shows you the corners a bit more too. So they just help to break the level up, and they give it a bit of depth. You don't have to have them. It does look a bit awkward without them though. So I recommend just having something. It just is a bit of a filler. It does look a lot better than the alternative. I promise you, when the walls are just touching, you lose visibility of your hallways. You can't see what's going on. So I found this to be a really good solution for that. But once again, it depends on the kind of game you're building, and that's the thing. You don't necessarily have to have a dungeon with walls, etc. You can just use this for the positioning of tiles, for any other kind of game, because you can then treat these objects perfectly normally. The system has been designed so that you don't use tags or layers to get any of this stuff to work, so you can still assign a tag or a layer to a tile as needed, so that once the dungeon's been generated you can then do further checks on it, or you can do whatever you want to those tiles. So it doesn't have to be a dungeon crawler, so to speak. You can use it to make the level layout for just like a city builder or an RTS or whatever you want. It's not limited in that regard. It's only limited to your imagination. But that's the whole generator, and if you do have any questions, leave us a comment. You're always welcome to get in contact with me, and please, if you have used it and you have any feedback, I'm always happy to hear it. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll make sure we have some more videos and maybe an intro video, that kind of thing, up as soon as the asset is released. Thank you.